Okay, so today I thought I'd do something a little bit different and have a little bit of fun. And I'm going to be looking at what I feel are the top 10 Marvel Legends figures produced by ToyBiz. So, for a little bit of context, Marvel Legends began life under the ToyBiz banner way back in 2002. It's worth pointing out that before this, ToyBiz was producing Marvel figures from all sorts of different ranges, from the animated cartoons through to comic adaptations. They basically own the Marvel universe. And what they would release was mainly sort of 5-inch figures with roughly 9 points of articulation. There were some exceptions that had a bit more, but that was sort of your standard kind of figure release. They also did like a 10-inch range as well, and this was kind of for the part really for action figures of the time throughout the 90s. Towards the end of the 90s, we started to see companies like McFarlane who were starting to produce figures that had a lot more detail, and these figures were very nice. They had tons of detail, but were usually very limited in terms of articulation, and they looked more like mini statues really than action figures. So what ToyBiz did in 2002 was take a figure with lots of detail and combine it with greater articulation. So in a sense, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. And this was something that was kind of new, really, to the collecting market. And this changed action figures forever, really. This changed the market completely. And the rest, as they say, is history. Obviously, the Marvel Legends range went on to do spectacularly well, and they are still with us today, albeit under new management in the Hasbro brand, which took over in 2006 and has been producing these figures ever since. And what I wanted to do today was look back to those forerunners, those early trailblazers from the ToyBiz years, and look at those Marvel Legends figures and see, which ones were the best. I should point out, of course, that this is entirely subjective. It's just my personal opinion, but I thought I'd share it with you, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts as well. So when I started to think about compiling a list of my top 10, I had to set about creating some ground rules. Because this was more tricky than I thought it was going to be. During the 4 years that ToyBiz was making these figures, they produced an awful lot. And in order to narrow them down to just 10 figures, I had to set some rules for myself. So rule number 1, no builder figures. The builder figures that ToyBiz produced during this time were some of the best ever produced. And it simply wouldn't be fair to put ordinary single-carded releases up against a builder figure, so I had to rule them out early on. Now the second rule I had to create for myself was to simply stick to the releases that were under the Marvel Legends banner, i.e. it says Marvel Legends on the packaging and not a subset. ToyBiz had a number of sub-series. They had Spider-Man Classics, they had a Fantastic Four wave, they had numerous X-Men waves, and they were all very much in the style of Marvel Legends, but obviously this becomes a huge undertaking. And so really, to be fair, I've just narrowed it down to the ones the Marvel Legends logo on. That being said, I will have a couple of honourable mentions that sort of fit outside the banner of this, but I feel they still deserve some recognition. So without further ado, we'll get started and jump right in at number 10. This is the Series 4 Gambit figure. What's immediately striking about this figure is the fact that he comes with that leather trench coat. It fits perfectly, it looks really good, and this is one of the very few times that we've seen this in a Marvel Legends figure. Even to this day, we don't see fabric clothing on our Marvel Legends. And it works so well here, it's fantastic. But also things like the chest plate that's got that slight metallic wash there, that just really is very striking visually, and it just looks really cool. I love the detailing in the shin pads and the chest plate at the top there. The head sculpt is great. It's got that slight smirk, which isn't always appropriate, but again, does really capture the character. And he also came with a ton load of accessories as well for the time. He had his bow staff, he had his throwing cards, and it was just a really fantastic looking figure. And it still stands up almost 20 years later. Next in, at number 9 on the list, we have Series 3, The Mighty Thor. I remember when this figure was first released and I was just absolutely blown away by it. The level of detail there that you can see in the boots and in the costume. His chest pieces are kind of rubber, and the texture of it is just really nice. And just the absolute stature of the figure, really, the brand new mold that I'd never seen before. It's the scale of it. He's absolutely, huge, really, and really feels like the god of thunder. And this was absolutely mind-boggling when I first got him. And for many, many years, he would be the only version of a classic Thor that we would have until a few years ago when Hasbro re-released this character. But for my money, I still think this one is incredibly impressive. And I think that mainly comes down to the unique body mold that we never saw again. And this was the first time you could really put your Marvel Legends figures together, as you can see here with Captain America, and get that sense of, of genuine scale, which was what made the line so exciting. Then, in at number 8, we have the Series 5 Sabretooth figure. Like the Thor, this was the first time I saw this body mold, and I think might have been one of the very few times it was used. I'm not sure if it was used again. But it was just, really striking on first glance. The snarling head sculpt with the open mouth. The sheer height of this figure, he's significantly taller than the standard 6 inches. He's probably about 7 inches tall. The articulated fingers as well, which we'll get a close look at in a second. But also like the mangy mane that he's got, and as you can see, the articulated fingers and the claws, each digit moves, and that was always with mixed results in the old Marvel Legends ToyBiz years, but this is one where it really works really well to get lots of different threatening poses, and I just think he looks really overbearing and really intimidating. Here he is with his updated counterpart from Hasbro that was released a few years ago, and I really like the colouring on the re-release. That feels more appropriate, the brighter orangey yellow. That said, you can still see that the original, the Series 5, is still significantly taller, and I actually think the head sculpt is better, and it's just its overall mass and size just seems more impressive to me, and seems to capture more essence of the character. And here he is with the Marvel Select version of the character as well. So there's quite a few different versions of this version of Sabretooth's costume out there, and I still think out of all of them, the Series 5 one probably takes the edge. Yes, admittedly, I do prefer the colouring on the Hasbro version, but I think the size, scale, the head sculpt, and just overall feel to this character is just the winner for me. And rather appropriately, following on from Sabretooth, the 7th entry on my list is the Wolverine Weapon X from Series 7. By this point, ToyBiz had already made at least another 2 versions of Wolverine, but I have to say this is the best version of the character they've done thus far. The attention to detailing, the scale of the figure, and just the amount of extra details in terms of the accessories just make this figure really pop. There's literally not a single part of this figure which doesn't have extensive paint washes and apps to just really enhance the quality of this figure. There's so much detail here to the little, the colours and the buttons on his, on those well, whatever they are, to the tubes that can connect to different parts of his body, to the obviously all the individual hairs that are painted on his wrist, his chest, his legs, and also I think they've actually managed to get the claws right on this figure for the first time, and also then the head sculpt itself with the visor there, it's got all kinds of extra shading on it, and yeah, it's just a really impressive looking figure. The sculpting works really well on this figure as well, and it feels like this is a really unique figure. Like it felt really separate to anything else that was in the collection up to this point. And as I say, I think the head sculpt particularly is really impressive. He also came with an extra head as well, as if that wasn't enough, and really what shines through is just the level of attention to detail in this figure, this sculpt. It's just absolutely brilliant. And as before, we talk about the level of articulation, because this also has an incredible amount of articulation, and the possibilities for dynamic poses are infinite. For my 6th entry on the list, this might take people by surprise, but I've actually got Doctor Doom from Series 2. Now, the impression I've got is that this figure really isn't liked at all amongst the Marvel Legends collectors community. And I'm not entirely sure why, because I've always loved this figure, and I've always thought it's been quite striking. Marvel Legends would go on to recycle this figure later on as a Doom bot, and I've always really liked this figure. I've always liked the paint apps and the sort of the slightly dirty wash they've given him to make that armour look well worn. I love the darker colour palette that they've given him. His cape is a sort of flexible rubber, which works really well. It doesn't hinder his articulation, which, to be fair, his articulation is more limited when compared to other Marvel Legends in the wave, but I've always thought it had a really nice sculpt and just looked really, really good. And I've always loved that you could take the faceplate off. Admittedly, I've always thought the face underneath was a little bit strange. I think there's been a number of different variants of this figure, and mine is the one obviously that has the single scar on the cheek there. It's probably not the best likeness of the character. My understanding was that Doctor Doom was much more scarred than this, and in which case, why is he wearing the mask? But yeah, I mean, it's not a very attractive look, to be honest, and you're going to want to keep that faceplate on there. But still, it is a very nice touch, and you can see the level of detail in the actual face mask itself, and it fits so snugly as well. And then there's other little details. There's the little jetpacks on his back there. The fact that you take the cloak off, he comes with a Luger that fits really nicely into his holster. These are all just little extras that are just really endearing, and I love this figure. And after all these years and having many other Doctor Dooms in my collection, he's still one of my favourites. In at number 5 is one of my all-time favourite figures. It is, of course, the Series 11 or Legendary Riders series, Hulkbuster Iron Man. Oh man, I mean, just look at this figure. Is it any surprise that he is on my top 10 list? He looks amazing, and he was a really, really difficult figure to find as a collector back in the day. I was incredibly lucky in finding him by chance one day, and I had to pick him up, and yeah, I've never regretted it. He is a gargantuan, huge figure, incredibly heavy as well, and amazing to think that he was just a single carded figure, because now he would almost certainly be a builder figure. But yeah, the quality of the paint apps on this figure, the gold in particular, is this lovely metallic wash there, and it just looks amazing. The red is really vibrant. The articulation is slightly limited, but it has articulation in the fingers, in the shoulders, in the arms, the legs, and in the torso. So there's actually a surprising amount of articulation, even if the range of motion isn't that great. But that doesn't matter, because he is just such an impressively visual figure. What's really nice is that he does have an extra little feature that the helmet does lift off, so you get that Tony Stark head there, and even on the inside there's some nice little detailing, so you can see the sort of like buttons and equipment there, and it's just yeah, it just looks great. I think the sculpt of Tony inside looks good as well, and it's just a wonderful figure. It's just so visually impressive, and yeah, it just looks great. And of course, where he really shines is when you start putting him with your other figures in the collection, so you get that sense of scale. Here he is with one of my favourite Incredible Hulk figures, so you can kind of see that they're very evenly matched, and yeah, doesn't that look fantastic? No matter what you do with him, he always looks great. And surprisingly, there haven't been many reissues of this character to date, really. Marvel selected one, and Hasbro released a movie Build-A-Figure version of the Hulkbuster, but it's a very different design. But this is the only really sort of comic accurate one in the 6-inch scale. Now, number 4 on my list is another one which is one of my all-time favourite figures, and this is the Series 4, The Punisher. This was just such a fantastic figure. I couldn't believe just how detailed and articulated this figure was when I bought him all those years ago, and he came with some really cool accessories as well. He's got his rifle there, but he also had a pistol, and he just looks great. I really love the sculpt on this figure. I think this is the best face sculpt of the Punisher I've ever seen on any figure. To me, this really just perfectly captures what I think the Punisher should look like. But I just love the way they've painted the skull chest. It just looks fantastic there. It just looks, the paint wash and the application of that on his belt, and just all like the little details in the little pockets and the pouches that he's got on his trousers and his utility belt there. It just looks brilliant. And there's articulation in the hands as well, but they're moulded perfectly so that you can hold a variety of different weapons and hold them in different poses as well. I've always really loved the boots on this figure. They just look really chunky and textured, and just they look great. And I honestly don't think this figure has ever been bettered by any subsequent releases. They've made quite a lot of Punishers over the years. Here you can see him with a couple of Hasbro re-releases from years later, and they're all very good, but this one is the one that really stands out to me as being definitive of what the Punisher should be and what he should represent, and that's high praise considering this figure is nearly 20 years old. Number 3 on my list is the bombastic, bouncing Series 4 Beast. This was still early days for the Marvel Legends line. They were still experimenting with different body types and what they could do and pushing the envelope when it came to articulation. And I think Beast is really the ultimate, really, in combining all these different ideas. Hyper detail, lots of shading, colouring, obviously a complete unique body mould, and it had wonderful, incredible articulation. He has the a hinged jaw there with obviously lots of detail on the teeth and the tongue, but you can actually close that jaw. Obviously he's got articulation in his neck, his head, everything you'd expect, but then he's got extra articulation. He's got it in his hands, he's got it in his feet, he's got it at the top of his hips there, as well as thigh swivels. He's it feels almost endless, the possibilities. The only thing he's missing is an ab crunch, but he's brilliant. And he's such a heavy, solid figure, and just always looks brilliant in the collection. And honestly, despite Marvel Select and Hasbro Marvel Legends updating and re-releasing this character, I still think this one is the best. This next figure is one of my all-time favourites, and it's amazing to think that this figure was released in the very first wave. It is, of course, the Series 1 Captain America. This would be the first time that Captain America was made in the Marvel Legends line. It certainly would not be the last, as they made many, many more after this. But I feel that this is probably my all-time favourite and possibly the best version of the character. I absolutely love the sculpt. Again, it is completely unique to this figure. I just feel like the proportions look perfect. I really like the head sculpt. I love the articulation on it, and I just think the colouring of this is so nice. Hopefully you'll be able to see that the little extra paint details that's created that sort of scale mail armor that he has. It's just very subtly done, just like it is in the comics, but it looks brilliant. The proportion of the star on his chest looks great. The colouring of this figure is really a very vibrant blue, and yeah, I just love the way the shield looks. And then it's just things like the wings on his head are a separate piece. They again got that little bit of detail in there. They're not just painted on. They don't look like they've just been stuck on. They look properly distinct. And the nearest comparison I could find would be the Hasbro Marvel Legends Captain America figure that was released a few years ago, which came with the Cap Wolf head, which was a really, it's a really nice figure. But this is the closest sort of comic book comparison that's been released. And it's a very nice figure, but for my money, I do think that the Series 1 is much better. Like I said, the body type, the colouring, like I said, the little details like the scale mail, the wings on the head, and even that proportion of the shield looks better to my eyes. And I just feel like the ToyBiz one just has this much more unique, distinctive quality that, again, for me, really captures the character. It has a wonderful toyetic quality that just looks really inviting. And as I say, for me, I much prefer the head sculpt as well. It just feels much more appropriate for Captain America. And honestly, I don't feel that this has ever been bettered. I think ToyBiz hit the ground running when they released this figure in the first wave, and this would really be the template that other figures would follow. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. What a way to start your series. Okay, and the all-time number one ToyBiz Marvel Legends figure is the Series 3 Ghost Rider. ToyBiz were incredibly experimental in their first few waves, and none demonstrates this more than their attempt at Ghost Rider here. This is, of course, the Danny Ketch 90s Ghost Rider that we're seeing, and wow, what an amazing thing they've done here. They not only have they produced the figure, they've given him his motorcycle, which does actually move. It has wheels in the wheels to help it move along without compromising that sculpt of the flames. He sits on it perfectly, and he even comes with a chain that clips off so he can hold it and use it as his chain weapon, and it straps around him perfectly. The head sculpt, the detailing, the articulation, everything about this figure just really, really works. And it could have gone so horribly wrong, but it's brilliant, absolutely mind-boggling to think that they released this figure as a single carded figure for the same price as all the others. Years later, Hasbro would do an original Johnny Blaze version of the Ghost Rider with a motorcycle. It was, of course, the deluxe version, and of course the motorcycle has more articulation, the wheels move and there's more flame effects and whatnot, but his price point is double the price of a single carded figure, and to think that we got this amazing figure so early on is a real testament to this line, and it's what made it such a success. Absolutely wonderful, and it has never been surpassed. So there you go, that's my top 10. Now, at the beginning of the video, I did mention that I had great difficulty selecting these 10, and there were a few honourable mentions I wanted to throw in there. Obviously, for time's sake, I won't go into great detail, but I might do another video at some point. But on my list was the Marvel Legends Face-Off Hulk. Obviously, it wasn't strictly a single-carded figure, so that's why it wasn't included, but I do love him. Likewise, there was the Series 7 Bishop, which just sadly was just edged out by the others, but it was such a fantastic figure. Another really good figure that I wanted to include was the Galactus Wave War Machine. Such a lot of fun with this figure, very difficult one to get back in the day. It just had loads of accessories and set the bar for that, really. So sad that he didn't quite make it onto this list, mainly because I felt that the Hasbro version has actually surpassed this one now. Another casualty from the same wave is Doctor Strange. A wonderful, wonderful figure, and very, very close to making it onto this list, and just sadly was just slightly edged out, but I've always been in two minds about it. Also, of course, the Spider-Man Classics Hobgoblin figure, which is just absolutely fantastic, and for me, the definitive version of this character, but again, not strictly a Marvel Legends, that's why it wasn't included. And very similarly, from an X-Men wave, was the Archangel figure, which was just magnificent. Look at the wingspan on that. Incredible and very ambitious figure. yeah, again, sadly not a single carded figure, so didn't make it to the list. But I might do a runners-up video soon to talk about these in a bit more depth. So what did you think? Do you agree with my top 10? Let me know in the comments below, and until then, I'll see you in the next video. I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as I'll be posting more videos soon.